You're listening to the Cinemental Podcast.
Shall we begin?
Welcome back to the Cinemental Podcast, where we discuss mental health themes from cinema, television, and popular culture. I'm Jeffrey Jones, and I'm a filmmaker and professor, and I'm joined, as always, by my brother, Dr. Joshua Jones, who, as well as being the last psychiatrist I would personally turn to if I was possessed, is a general and forensic psychiatrist.
Why is that? Why am I the last psychiatrist you would turn to if you were possessed?
I need someone objective. There's too much history. There's too much love. There's too much, things for the devil to use against you, you know? I think it would
you
be...
mean other than the fact that I couldn't treat you because I'm your brother and that'd be unethical? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I don't think the devil cares about that per se. I think you'd be too emotional. I don't think you can keep a level head because it's your brother who you love.
Fun fact, Jeff, I was actually on religion scholarship in college.
Yeah, still wouldn't let you perform my exorcism.
I'm not asking to.
We want you to start your week off right with our podcast, so we drop a new episode every Monday morning sometimes, and then another supplemental episode on Thursday mornings, both at 9 a.m. Eastern. You can listen to us wherever you get your podcasts, or you can watch our hottest, spiciest clips and now full episodes on the old YouTubes. Today we're covering The Exorcist, the OG of exorcism films, who stole the best title for all future exorcism films. And one of the greatest horror films of all time. The movie is about a possessed girl and the priest battling with his own faith and the exorcism that follows, based on the real-life 1949 case of a Maryland boy whose alleged possession shocked the nation and inspired one of the most controversial horror films of all time. Josh, what are we going to cover today in terms of mental health? Please tell me we're going to cover exorcisms.
You know what, Jeff? I think we are, actually.
Hot diggity.
We're going to talk about the interplay between religion, spirituality, and mental health, in which exorcisms fall at the very, very far end of the spectrum, but we'll talk about that. I want to hear your thoughts about some of the scenes in The Exorcist, and then we're also going to talk about the medical workup that Reagan went through and how medicine has changed from The Exorcist to today. Because this movie is about 50 years old, and I think they did a good job of talking about cutting-edge medicine at the time, but boy, have we learned a lot.
Cutting edge back then is not necessarily cutting edge now. And then Thursday, we're going to cover more of the actual case from 1949, and then we'll talk a little bit about some of the politics of the week, mental health issues of the week, and give our top 5. So tune in for that on Thursday. All right, Josh, we do have a sponsor this week, which I'm pretty excited about. We're wandering into the fitness space. This episode is brought to you by Exercise, the only workout program that targets your abs and your abominations. Exorcisms are getting longer and longer these days. So long, in fact, you might not have time to go to the gym. But with Exercise, you'll sweat out your demons with high-intensity interval prayer, power lunges of the Lord, and our patented resistance rosary. Whether you're battling gluttony, sloth, or a minor demon named Beelzebubbles, Exercise will have you saying, "The power of Christ compels these gains." Sign up today and get your first pre-blessed Exercise band absolutely free.
Boy, there's a lot to unpack there, Jeff. There's a lot to unpack about your psychology and coming up with
Don't know what you're talking about. I don't have anything to do with who our sponsors are other than cash in the checks. Okay.
The power of Christ compels these glutes.
All right. So if you haven't seen the movie, just stop and watch it now because it's time. It's that good. This is probably my top 5 favorite films of all time. But if you haven't seen it, it's about a 12-year-old girl named Reagan McNeil begins exhibiting bizarre and violent behavior. Her actress mother, Chris, played by Ellen Burstyn, I think.
Ellen Burstyn.
Fantastic. I didn't see her again until Requiem for a Dream. And oh my God, that performance was incredible. So Chris, her mom, they're desperately seeking medical and psychological help for Reagan, only to find no explanation. As Reagan's condition worsens, marked by disturbing physical changes and supernatural occurrences, Chris turns to the Catholic Church for help. Father Damien Karras, a priest struggling with his own crisis of faith, is called to investigate and ultimately teams up with the experienced exorcist Father Merrin. Together, they confront the demonic force possessing Reagan in a harrowing battle of faith, sacrifice, and evil. Are exorcisms good medicine?
No, of course they're not. No, they're not. They're not good medicine. To that blunt question, here's your blunt answer: they're not medicine. But let's unpack that because
I'm so excited to talk about it.
The provocative question would lend one to believe, oh, well, this psychiatrist doesn't believe in religion. No, I say no.
Right. To that I say, no, sir.
Exorcisms are a ritual, mostly of a bygone era, in the religious realm. Neither of us are religion experts. They don't do them very much anymore, et cetera, et cetera.
Fun fact, Josh, you and I have both been exorcised.
What?
Yeah, a baptism is an exorcism. If you've been baptized, you've gone through an exorcism. That's a real thing.
I think it's a matter of how you look at it.
The ritual, though, is an exorcism. It's considered an exorcism because you're blessing the child, and everybody is agreeing to like keep the spirits away.
I'm gonna have to put a pin in that one. I don't think that's true because an exorcism is actually getting a demon or a possession out of somebody. But you know what? That's not the point. The point is I'm right, you're wrong. Let's move on.
I can't wait for you to look this up because I am right. Yeah, okay.
All right. But I think the real question is, what role does a patient's religious and spiritual beliefs play in their psychiatric or psychological presentation when they're really, really ill? And the answer is a lot.
So as a psychiatrist,
yeah,
you are paying attention not just to the medicine, but you're paying attention to the beliefs of the patient.
100%.
Okay, that's interesting.
That is part of every good standard psychological or psychiatric evaluation is to find out what a person believes about what is happening to them, informed by their sociocultural upbringing, including their religion and spiritual beliefs.
Okay.
In fact, one of the questions that I always ask everybody, even after, I've asked them about their spiritual beliefs, etc., at the very end, before I go into here's what I think's going on with you, I always ask a patient, what do you think is going on with you?
Okay.
And a lot of the times, especially in our day and age where everybody's got access to the internet and there's a lot more collective intelligence about mental health issues, people will say, well, I think I've got major depression, or, well, I think I've got generalized anxiety. Sometimes people will say, and especially if you dig or give people the permission to expose their religious beliefs, sometimes you will get people will say things like, I think I've been cursed, or I think that a demon is tormenting me.
You've had that happen before?
I've had that happen recently.
Do you immediately think that this person needs psychiatric care, or are you open to the possibility that like they believe this, but it's manifesting as something else? Or do you immediately think like schizophrenic?
I do not immediately think that. I mean, they're already getting psychiatric care, right? They're talking to me, so I'm providing them with an evaluation. They're already kind of down that road.
Yeah, but you and I have had psychiatric care. There's a massive, difference.
What I think you're asking is do red lights go off in my head going, this person is psychotic. This person has a delusion. And the answer is absolutely not.
Interesting.
That's when I start to explore, okay, what do you mean by that? And sometimes, as happened recently with a patient, they'll say, well, I don't mean an actual demon. I know like I'm not possessed or anything like that, but I really feel like because of the things I've done and the sins I've done, and this person was very religious, I feel like I'm paying the price and being haunted by my demons, small d demons. Great. Okay. Understandable. I will also have situations where people are like, yeah, absolutely, I have a demon inside me, for sure. And then you have to dig more. Okay, is this part and parcel of a well-established and understood part of your spiritual and religious community?
Okay.
And if it is, then we have to be really cautious about saying this is psychotic. But if it's not, then you say, okay, we need to go down the psychotic pathway and treat you for psychosis. I have had some really interesting cases. This is much earlier in my career where I had the opportunity to talk with, for instance, their spiritual leader. I had somebody who was brought in once from a summer camp, a Christian summer camp, and they were, speaking in tongues and having a whole bunch of religious experience. And it was actually their pastor who brought them and said, look, we believe in, being touched by the power of the Lord and speaking tongues and stuff. I need to tell you, this is outside what we believe. This is showing that this person's really, really sick right now.
Interesting. Can you tell me what happened with that?
We ended up hospitalizing the person and starting them on antipsychotic medication, and they got better over actually a pretty short period of time.
Wow, interesting. We've covered this in a previous episode, so I sort of know the answer already, but you say that paying attention to someone's spiritual beliefs is important.
Very much so.
Is exorcism specifically in the DSM-5?
It's not. What is in the DSM-5 are culture-bound syndromes.
Okay, that's what I'm getting to. Yeah, explain culture-bound syndromes and how that's good medicine.
The DSM-5, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Illnesses, it's now on its 5th edition, is a consensus document where a whole bunch of really smart psychiatrists, psychologists, and other mental health professionals get together and say, based on all the scientific
Todd
evidence.
was also invited to that, and Todd's, we don't like to talk about Todd.
Todd brings his crayons, and he does a great job. Folks, there's no Todd. Jeff's just being Jeff. You know, these youngsters, they're just raging against the machine.
I used to torture Josh. It was some very meaningful event of yours.
Yeah, it was my medical school graduation.
And I put I think Armando on my name tag. I wanted him to be like, "Oh, my brother, blah," but he didn't. He was just so dismissive. He's like, "It's just raging against the machine." And I was like, "Oh, I'm just pathetic." And I just stopped. I stopped doing stuff like that. Let's get back to it.
People got together, created the DSM-5 based on our scientific knowledge of what mental illnesses exist and what we have evidence for. It is through a Western lens. It is unapologetic about that. But what we do say is, look, we, Western influenced psychiatrists, we don't know everything. We definitely don't know a lot about what our part of the mental health world hasn't studied very much. Mm-hmm. And these are psychiatric and mental health conditions that are filtered through or seen through the lens of a particular culture. So, for instance, there are some Southeast Asian culture-bound syndromes around anxiety. In South America, there's particular types of mental illnesses or mental conditions that don't fit neatly into our diagnostic boxes, but are absolutely important to understand.
What does culture-bound mean? Do you call it something different because it is from a different part of the world, different belief structure?
Yeah, you do. And it may be expressed. The same type of distress may be expressed differently because of a person's culture, belief system, social pressures, social expectations, etc., in a different part of the world, even a different part of our country than in heteronormative, white, male-dominated society.
Yeah. Let me pivot a little bit here, Josh. So Karis was a psychiatrist as well as a priest. Do you know any psychiatrists who believe in exorcisms and possession?
Yes.
Wow, that's cool.
Look, I had not seen The Exorcist before. I'm not a horror movie guy. They just don't do it for me. So I'd kind of stayed away from, the mother of all horror movies and, of course, the definitive exorcism type movie. This movie was fantastic.
Yeah, it's a great movie.
I mean, of course, it was dated in some of the editing styles and the jump cuts and things like that. And it was certainly a slow build. It did not hold the attention of my 19-year-old daughter, but I thought it was incredibly well done and an incredible movie.
Things were handled with care. That's what I loved about this. Mental health was handled with care. Possession was handled with care. It wasn't just let's get to the next jump scare. Everything was handled with such detail and care.
Right.
That's a Friedkin thing, by the way. William Friedkin, the director.
I would point people back to an earlier episode we did where we did an episode on the Pope's Exorcist, which was a Russell Crowe movie. And we kind of did it just because it was, coming up on the top 10, the top 10 Netflix lists and all that kind of stuff.
I'm so glad we did Pope's Exorcist first, by the way, because I don't think we'd found our footing yet. Yeah. And it would have been a shame to cover The Exorcist early. And now we're just pros, just podcast pros.
Our 200 subscribers agree, Jeff. And
don't inflate our numbers, Josh.
But my point is, you should look at those two podcasts and you should look at those two movies together because The Pope's Exorcist is exactly the movie you would get if they tried to make The Exorcist de novo today. It was basically the same story. It had Russell Crowe. It had a little bit of a different kind of, Vatican-esque flair to it, but it was basically the same story. I actually liked The Pope's Exorcist, thought it was a pretty good movie. It was because The Exorcist paved the way and did all of these things first and did them better.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, totally agree. Has there ever been something you've come across in your psychiatry practice that you just could not explain? Because this is what happens in the movie.
Yeah,
Let me
yes.
contextualize it to the film.
Sure.
They put Riley through a bunch of, or Regan, they put Regan through a bunch of, Riley's the kid from Inside Out, not possessed. She's got little voices inside her head, but still not possessed. So Regan goes through a battery of tests, like she would. That's what's so great about it. Is it's a little bit of the horror of like, we know she's possessed, but that's not the assumption that doctors would make. So they're going to put her through all these tests first. They cannot figure out what to do. They cannot figure out how to help this girl, and so they turn to the Catholic Church. Have you ever had it's just like, I don't understand. There's nothing we can do. And have you ever wondered, is this something that faith could help with?
Yeah, those are 3 separate questions. Have you ever been stumped? All the time. That's why this is called the practice of medicine. You don't just get this one shot at it. We get to run tests, and we get to relook at things, and we get to think about the patient's presentation. We get to ask new questions. We get to consult with colleagues. We get to say, hey, let's get you a second opinion. Let's keep working on this until we can come up with some working theory about what's going on with you, to the level that our science can understand it. You then ask the question, is there sometimes nothing you can do about it? Not usually. Usually we know enough about mental health presentations and conditions where we can say, hey, I think that this is what you can do. Now, there are some conditions that are kind of untreatable. The most important one that we haven't really found a good treatment for is antisocial personality disorder, which we've talked about.
Psychopaths, right?
Yeah, those are
killers.
psychopaths.
Okay.
Yeah, we've talked about that. Really extreme, severe psychopaths, we don't have effective psychological or psychiatric treatments for them. Those people usually aren't coming to you for help. In Reagan's case, she would probably today be given a diagnosis of functional neurologic symptom disorder, which is a mouthful. But what it really means is you're having a whole lot of neurologic type symptoms, right? You're having convulsions, you're having seizures, you're speaking in tongues, you're having weird vomiting and stuff like that. We don't know why. No test that we have right now is giving us an answer, but we know something's wrong with you. Something is distressing you. It's in this gap between our understanding of neurology and psychiatry. And that's where these folks tend to lie. And that's where we tend to treat symptoms with medications that are available, but then really counsel the person through, hey, we don't really know what's going on with you. Let's help you manage your distress while also not trying to say, oh, it's just all in your head.
Right.
And that's really a challenge.
I've noticed that doctors will give the biggest mouthful words to the things that they don't know what's going on.
Totally.
It's like, you've got the schlittle biddle madiddle syndrome. And it's like, well, wow, that sounds serious. What does it mean? We don't really know. We don't really know if that's why we gave it this fancy sequence of words.
Jeff, when we don't know what it is, we bill by the syllable.
That's great. I ask you this every time because I want you to give me a different answer, but I'm going to ask you again. Is there anything that could happen where you would say, okay, this person is possessed? Like, for instance, in The Exorcist, head spins around a couple times. That's pretty freaky. Stuff flies across the room. If stuff flies across the room, are you going to be like, yep, she's possessed, we need to get an exorcist in here?
Look, stuff flies across the room, probably not. Head spin all the way around, something's not right there. Somebody levitating, yeah, something's not right there. This is beyond medicine for me.
Okay, so, Dr. Josh, you've been moved to some island. You're the only doctor. There's some priests. There would be context in which you would say, let's go get the priest.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There's contexts now where I say, you know what? Let's get a spiritual consult for you within the hospital that we do now.
Oh, interesting. Because the power of faith can help heal.
Absolutely.
That's
there
great.
is an interplay.
Yeah. Okay, so this is neat because you told me about this a little earlier and I wanted you to say it out loud, but you were talking about a part of the brain that gets activated. Tell me more about that.
This is pretty fascinating. We know through a really particularly newfangled test called functional MRI that there are particular parts of the brain that light up or are incredibly active when people are having religious or spiritual experiences. Jeff, have you ever had an MRI?
Oh, yeah.
So they stick you in this tube, there's a bunch of magnets, and basically an MRI or magnetic resonance imaging is looking at how water moves around in the body.
Sure.
And because of that, we can figure out where cells are, tissues are, things like that. A functional MRI is really cool. And they're not really used for clinical practice right now. They're mostly used for research. But a functional MRI looks at how things are moving in the body real time. Most specifically, how sugar or glucose is being burned by the particular cells in the body. Sugar or glucose, that's what all our cells run on. The brain uses a lot of sugar and a lot of glucose. So we can do a functional MRI on somebody and see which parts of the brain, which collection of cells are really active during particular experiences. So through this, you're starting to fade out. You're being addicted.
No, it's not that. But here's the thing, man. You just get so excited about it. And you think certain things are fascinating. Like, three-quarters of the things. Three-quarters of the things that you think are fascinating, I think are fascinating to the masses. But there is a tiny percentage of the thing that Josh just goes about that I just think people tune out, and I try and be that catcher, that buffer for it. But as soon as you start talking about sugar and glucose in the brain moving around, I'm like, I need some sugar and glucose in my brain. But keep going. I'm interested, and there will be people who are interested.
Stick
with us for later. There's going to be some more fun stuff.
Okay, here's the big point, is that in the parietal lobe, so the lobes on the side.
Parietal lobe. Keep going.
Fuck right off.
How many lobes are there, Josh? Can you name all the lobes?
Yes.
I know you can. I bet you get really excited about it too.
Okay, there's some collection.
You got this.
There's such a dick. There are collections of cells in the brain that when people are having religious or spiritual experiences, those cells are really churning through glucose. They're really metabolically active. And so we know that those cells are really firing up in the parietal lobe, in the temporoparietal junction, and the periaqueductal gray.
You heard it right there, though, right? As you went through those three.
Yeah, I heard it.
Okay. All right. The fact that religious people have an area of their brain that lights up is fascinating to me.
Oh, but it gets better, Jeff.
Ooh, tell me
It gets better, Jeff. Even if you
Stroke my parietal lobe.
Even if you don't have a strongly held religious belief.
Okay.
If we stimulate these areas of the brain, and we know this through studies of people who are having brain surgery, and you have to put in very small electrodes in the brain, give tiny shocks to, see if it lights up. Usually this is happening when you're having like a tumor resection or something where you actually have to be in the brain. Otherwise, it's very hard to study what's actually going on inside the brain. If you stimulate these areas, people will feel a oneness with the universe. They will feel sensations of unity. They will feel spiritual acceptance, religiosity.
Okay, well, now we're getting to some fascinating stuff.
I told you, you just had to wait.
Yeah. It's parietal something in the temporal.
Somebody who does research on the temporoparietal junction is going, oh, they said my area, that's right. Actually, they're probably going, well, actually, that's not quite right.
Totally. It's so funny because I had a friend who got stung by a manta ray. He was life flighted back to the United States. Had an allergic reaction to the medicine they gave him, and he just went psychotic. So for about a week, he was like completely psychotic, and he came out of it. And he's a scientist. He's still a scientist to this day. He came out of it with a absolute fervent belief in God. He saw God during this trip, and he 100% still believes in God. And I just think to myself now, it's like, okay, maybe that part of his brain through this whole process got so lit up that that's where his faith lives. That's where his faith, or he saw God. It's one of the two things. But it's very hard for me to believe, that when people say like I saw God, that they actually did.
I think you bring up a good point, because I don't want to be reductionist about this. It is not that, oh, well, your belief in God is just being, just some of the cells in your temporal parietal junction lined up. It is not that simple. And I do not want to, in any way seem like I'm denigrating people's strongly held beliefs by saying, oh, it's just this electrochemical reaction. No, this is a correlate. This is what happens. I'm not saying that this causes it. Right. It's very complex.
Right. Could you take a drug to spark it?
Some people are believing that you can. Some people are believing that psychedelics will help you, may stimulate some of these parts of the brain and may help. Because
that's a story right there. That's a film. That was fascinating, Josh. Thank you for going through all of it. I do appreciate it. Let's do this quick, Josh. Let's talk about the tests that Reagan went through. You found that fascinating, obviously, as a psychiatrist who knows the history of those things. Just talk to us a little bit about what you were like, oh, that's not what we do anymore. Talk to us a little bit about that.
The most stunning part of that whole test series was when they did the arteriogram. And interestingly enough, that was a scene that was highly controversial.
I don't know what that is.
When they put it up. I'm about to tell you. That was when they numbed up her neck and stuck the stylet into her neck, and then there were pulses of blood coming out, and then they fed a wire into it. What they were doing was called an arteriogram, and they were trying to, this was before CT scans, before MRIs. They were trying to map the major blood vessels in the brain and see if she had any kind of tumor or anything like that. We do arteriograms to this day, but mostly CT arteriograms where you just inject a dye into the bloodstream and then you see where it goes. One thing that they were talking about doing, but you didn't see it, is a technique that we don't do anymore called a pneumoencephalogram, where they actually inject air into the blood vessels.
Oh, wow.
Cause tiny emboli actually in the brain.
To say.
Yeah, and get a really good X-ray picture of where the blood vessels and where the blood would have been if you hadn't just injected air into the brain. So it's not done anymore. Not needed to be done anymore with CT and MRI.
Yeah. Is there anything from the movie they still do besides think they know better than the church?
Well, I thought that part was really interesting. They had a team of physicians around Reagan, and then they actually suggested to the mom, you might want to consider an exorcism because a lot of the stuff can be psychological, a lot of the stuff can be suggestible. It was a very 1970s way of saying, there may be something to her belief system about what's going on and things like this. I don't know that a doctor would go out and say, hey, I think you need an exorcism. If you recommend that, there's a reason the church doesn't do these anymore, right? You could do an exorcism and it could go very badly. You could end up reinforcing the behavior.
Right.
Because you're getting attention and all that kind of stuff. Assuming one is not really possessed.
When you read What's-His-Face's book, who was the Pope's exorcist, who was based on a real guy, he talks about doing hundreds of exorcisms. Yes, the Catholic Church doesn't do exorcisms anymore, and if they did, we'd hear about it. You'd have people on TikTok being like, hi guys, just got back from my exorcism, worked great, blah, blah. But what I think is really fascinating from like a screenwriter's perspective, because we tend to just think about whatever's the most interesting from a story perspective. And so I love thinking about exorcisms and possession. And my take on it would be that just as medicine is a practice, so is possession. And so we're not seeing people who are experiencing possession or showing the signs of possession because the demons have gotten really good at possessing. And I think that there's some not legitimacy, but there's some, you can look at the world now and see how crazy it's getting and think, yeah, there might be some people who are just being puppet mastered by a demon. It's not that hard to believe. And so, the practice of medicine, I think, is really fascinating because I also think that there's everybody's practicing, everybody's honing their craft. And who's to say that, people who seem perfectly normal now aren't possessed. And maybe they were back in the day when they were doing exorcisms as well, and those were just beginner demons. Hard to say. Just because they're not doing possessions doesn't mean people aren't possessed. It is possible. The demons have gotten really good at it. Do with that what you will.
Oh, I'm sorry. You know how...
Oh, fuck off. No, that was fascinating. You're just doing that to be a dick. That's hot tent. I don't want to hear it.
I'm not doing that to be a dick, Jeff. The demon who's gotten really good at possession, who's possessing me, is doing it.
Oh, so you were listening. Okay. You wanted to ask me a screenwriting question, although I don't even want to talk to you now because whatever I say, you're going to be like, oh, that's not even that interesting to a doctor. But what was the question you wanted to ask me about the film?
So again, I saw this movie just yesterday for the very first time. And it was obviously 1970s editing style and things like that. The title character of this movie was only in it for about 20 minutes.
Right.
10 minutes at the beginning and 10 minutes at the end. And this is Father Merrin, played by Max von Sydow. Yeah. And at the end, of course, he's doing the exorcism with Father Karras. And it's very dramatic. It's very exorcism-y. It's where all other movie exorcisms, draw their inspiration. Mm-hmm. But the first 10 minutes of the movie is this really kind of odd, incongruous journey that he's going through in Iraq, of all places, kind of maybe trying to find a talisman or a demonic piece or something. It was really different from the entire rest of the movie. I wanted to know your take on that. Is that an anachronistic style that we wouldn't see in movies anymore? Is that, what was that?
Yeah, you wouldn't see it anymore because The Exorcist sort of breaks one of the rules of screenwriting, which is always have the most interesting character be your main character. If there's somebody we'd rather follow, then why are you making a movie about someone that isn't as interesting? But what's really fun about art and about people who make film and have the power to make whatever they want to make is you can do something like this, which breaks the rule. And in a way, Father Karras is more interesting because he is us. He is the man who's struggling with his faith. And no matter what you believe in, we all struggle with our faith. The belief in yourself, we struggle with that faith in ourselves. So from a human standpoint, Father Karras is us. But from an absolutely fantastical standpoint, we want to see the best priest square off with the best demon. And that's what you have bookending this movie. And so it's rare that you would do this. And I'm struggling to think of another example. But that opening scene is setting up. I mean, that final scene of the opening scene, the final shot, is he's staring at the demon that has been dug up. And he knows one day you and I are going to come to blows. Mm-hmm. It's cool because we build the tension throughout, knowing it's going to lead to that old man from the beginning is going to come in and we're going to see something real special. It's not done because it breaks the rule, make the most interesting person the focus of your film. But I actually think it should be done more because what that's missing is what is the human element. It's kind of like when you watch a superhero movie. Like you could do a good superhero movie where the main character is someone who's been like displaced by a superhero. Like I pitched this movie once that was a fireman was the main character in a world of superheroes, and he's struggling with no longer being anyone's hero. And so it's really fascinating that it's like, what does it mean to be a hero, and why can't normal people be heroes in the world of superheroes? So that's the same kind of idea as The Exorcist. But yeah, you don't see that kind of movie anymore for that reason. Just want to give a shout out to Friedkin as a director. The level of detail in his films is incredible. I have a friend who was one of the directors and showrunners for ER, and William Friedkin came in and directed an episode of ER. Usually, when you come in and direct, you kind of fit in. Like they have a way that they go and you fit into it. Friedkin did not. He was like, I'm going to do my own thing and I'm going to stop and things are going to go as fast as I want. And the guy was like, he was so impressive because he wanted to know the story of the extra. He's like, okay, that person's in the back of this shot. What are they going through? What's their motivation? Why are they here? And the level of detail that he was interested in filmmaking is I think, really what sets his films apart. And I get lost in the level of detail in his films, like I did on The Exorcist. It's very hard to find any plot holes in a Friedkin film. I give him a lot of credit for that. But does that answer your question as to?
It does, yeah, it does. That's a really good point. We want to see the best. It's not called An Exorcist. It's called The Exorcist.
Right. The fun story is Karras reclaiming his faith
Yeah.
by watching The Exorcist.
And then immediately dying.
But he did it to save someone, and that's ultimately what every Christian I think wants to do, is be Jesus and martyr themselves.
Whoa, hot take right there at the end by Jeff Jones. Zing!
Like Christians are all of a sudden like, hey, I tuned out 10 minutes ago.
What? Zing!
All right, Josh, that's kind of it for me for today. We're going to talk a lot more about sort of the context on Thursday. We're going to talk about the real life story, and then talk about some fun stuff in the news and media. But any last thoughts you have on The Exorcist?
If you haven't seen it, watch it. And if you haven't seen it in a long time, watch it again. It's really good. This movie was way ahead of its time. It had a very strong female lead. Yeah, I just really appreciated it. I'm sorry I hadn't seen it sooner.
Yeah, I have a rule that I won't see any movie before the 1980s. And if this had been one of the ones that I had missed before I made that rule, I'd be really bummed because it's pretty awesome. All right, thanks as always for watching or listening to Cinemental and our coverage of The Exorcist. If you like this episode, please subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. You can also watch clips of Cinemental on YouTube, where we'd love to hear what you'd like us to cover next. You can also watch my companion series, The One Thing, where I will be having a One Thing about The Exorcist, where I take a deep dive into screenwriting, both available on the Large and in Charge channel on YouTube. Fun new thing in the background. I got it. Thank you to my wife for getting me that for my birthday. Follow Dr. Josh Jones, America's Psychiatrist, on Blue Sky. This has been a Large and in Charge production. For Josh Jones, I am Jeff Jones, and we will see you on Thursday.
I want you to hit me as hard as you can.